A horrifying discovery at Hudson Park. It was a serene spring morning at Hudson Park, a scenic urban oasis perched beside the river in the northern part of Manhattan, New York. Families strolled down the paved walkways, joggers passed by with rhythmic strides, and the sound of birds mixed harmoniously with the occasional distant rumble of city traffic. The tranquility was, however, shattered just a few hours after sunrise. Seamus O'Connor, a 56-year-old groundskeeper, began his typical morning duties like any other day. With his worn-out gloves and trusty cart, he maneuvered carefully around the park paths, collecting leftover bottles, discarded paper cups, and the occasional stray plastic bags from the previous day's visitors. Seamus was known around the park for not just his work ethic, but his peculiar ability to spot things out of place, a skill honed over 2 decades of tending public spaces. Around 8:15 a.m., something caught his eye near a row of bushes close to the riverbank. There, partially hidden by a layer of dew-speckled ferns, sat a tattered old suitcase. Seamus found it odd. Tourists or parkgoers often misplaced bags, but rarely did something so weathered and forlorn turn up. Probably junk someone tossed, he muttered to himself, pulling the cart closer. The suitcase was dark brown with faint streaks of faded red and gold piping on the seams. The latch was so rusted he figured it probably hadn't been opened in years. It was heavy when he first tugged at the handle, heavier than any piece of luggage should feel for its size. Seamus examined the suitcase for a moment and thought, maybe some old books. But the damp stains on the fabric told another story. The base of the bag was darkened by what seemed like water damage, or at least, he hoped that's all it was. Whatever might be inside, the suitcase had been sitting there long enough to soak up the wetness from the surrounding soil. Ignoring the subtle whiff seeping out, he tugged a pair of thick gloves over his hands, clicked his tongue, and cautiously opened the case. It was instant. A putrid metallic stench hit him like a violent wave, forcing him to reel back. The suitcase didn't contain books, clothes, or old keepsakes. Instead, it revealed a sight Seamus would later tell detectives froze the blood in my veins. Inside there appeared to be flesh, wrapping material, matted newspapers and translucent plastic, and the unmistakable shape of a human limb. Seams held together by a mangled, grotesque semblance of a person's lower torso, legs bent awkwardly and curled into the confines of the stained case. Seamus let out a strangled yell. Adrenaline surged through his body as he staggered backward, making distance from the macabre discovery. He stumbled over the edge of the path and into the soft grass, eyes wide, breath quickening. His throat went dry and his gloved hands shook visibly. Out of sheer instinct, he fumbled into the pocket of his green park-issue jacket and pulled out an old flip phone. 911, what's your emergency? Came the cool and practiced voice from the dispatcher. This is Seamus O'Connor, groundskeeper at Hudson Park. I found a suitcase near the river. Words tumbled out of his mouth incoherently. But there's something in it. I don't know, it's not normal. I think there's a body in here. Moments after the dispatcher calmed him enough to get his exact location, the faint wail of approaching sirens echoed through the park. By the time 2 squad cars, an ambulance, and a black unmarked sedan arrived at the scene, curious joggers and dog walkers had already begun circling at a distance, pointing and murmuring. Detective Laura Bennett of the NYPD Homicide Unit stepped out of her car, her sharp dark eyes taking in the situation. Another one of those park discoveries, she mused grimly to her partner, Detective Marcus King, who raised his coffee cup in acknowledgement. Seamus met the detectives as they approached, his face still pale and his usually steady voice quivering with stress. Relaying his account of how he found the grim suitcase, he unlocked new levels of detail for the investigators. Bennett crouched near the suitcase, carefully inspecting its surface. A faint constellation of scratches and scuff marks trailed along the edges. "Get a forensics team down here," she called out to Officer Simmons, who was taping off the site. King hovered just behind her. "River access over there," he noted, motioning to the water's edge. "Anyone could have dumped it from upstream." Nearby, Seamus, now seated and wrapped in a blanket an officer offered him, rubbed his temples. "I've worked this park 20 years, he muttered. "Thought I'd seen it all till this." What began as a routine day for Seamus had turned into the harrowing start of a chilling mystery. A piece of evil had washed up onto the peaceful shores of Hudson Park, and before the day was over, the park would no longer feel as serene or as safe as it once had. Police launched the investigation. It only took minutes after Seamus's harrowing 911 call for Hudson Park, a serene escape known for its urban peace, to be transformed into the center of a full-scale police operation. The once tranquil setting of joggers and families enjoying the park now buzzed with blue and red flashing lights. The NYPD had secured the scene quickly, taping off the surrounding area and stationing officers near the riverfront to control onlookers. Within an hour, the site took on a different character altogether. It buzzed with crime scene units, detectives, and a growing air of grim determination. Detective Laura Bennett, the lead investigator from the NYPD Homicide Unit, stood at the edge of the crime scene, her sharply tailored coat providing little protection against the brisk spring wind. She scanned the chaotic scene before turning to her partner, Detective Marcus King, a seasoned investigator with a laid-back demeanor and a bottomless coffee cup always in hand. Despite their stark differences in style, the two had worked seamlessly on countless high-profile cases over the years. "King!" Bennett barked, her eyes narrowing as they scanned the crime scene. "We have an unidentified body, well, parts of a body in this godforsaken suitcase. My gut's telling me this isn't a robbery gone wrong." She waved a hand toward the forensics team, who were diligently photographing the suitcase and collecting samples of the soil surrounding it. King leaned against the hood of their unmarked car, letting the steam from his coffee waft into the cool morning air. "You worried this isn't a one-off? That it could be another one of those serial cases like the ones we've seen uptown?" "Let's not go there yet," Bennett replied, flipping open her notepad and jotting down details as the forensics team called out observations. "But something about this reeks of deliberation. The wrapping, the poor attempt to conceal the body, it's organized but sloppy. Whoever did this wanted the body found. Or maybe they didn't care that it would be." Meanwhile, Seamus sat on a bench a few yards away, still clutching the thin blanket an officer had wrapped around him. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he recounted his story to Officer Simmons. "I didn't want to get closer," Seamus stammered, his Irish accent thicker under stress. "I've found some strange things in my 2 decades here. Lost wallets, runaway pets, but never something like that. I can still see it. I can still smell it." Simmons nodded empathetically as she took notes. "You did the right thing calling us, Mr. O'Connor. Just take your time and tell me exactly what you saw." Across the scene, Bennett crouched near the suitcase as one of the forensic techs handed her a pair of gloves. Inside the case, remnants of wet newspaper stuck to the plastic sheeting used to wrap the remains. Bennett's trained eye caught glimpses of detail: torn fingernails, bruises on the awkwardly folded legs, and the eerie absence of blood. "No blood, huh?" she muttered under her breath. "They dumped it post-mortem. They knew what they were doing." Special Agent Ryan Navarro from the Federal Crime Scene Task Force, who had been called in given the case's potentially interstate implications, arrived on site. His towering presence and pristinely pressed suit contrasted sharply with Bennett's casual, no-nonsense style. "This feels personal, doesn't it?" Navarro remarked as he joined Bennett by the suitcase. "This wasn't about stealing money breaking into a house. Someone went out of their way to dismember and dispose of their victim in the most dehumanizing way possible." Bennett raised an eyebrow. "You don't lead with hello, Navarro," she quipped, in no mood for pleasantries. "But yeah, personal. Organized but fueled by rage, maybe. We need to get this victim ID'd yesterday. No wallet, no phone, no fast answers here." Navarro motioned for one of his agents to start running local missing persons reports. "We'll prioritize women between late teens and early 30s. Hopefully we get some fingerprints off the body, if there's enough left to go on." King joined them, balancing yet another coffee in hand. "I talked to Simmons. Our groundskeeper didn't see anyone hanging around before the discovery. But get this, he remembers something unusual. He says last week he found a similar suitcase, but it turned out to be empty. Looked pretty much like this one. Could be a coincidence, but—" "There are no coincidences," Bennett cut him off, standing and dusting her gloved hands. "I want canvassing, cameras. Hudson Park has witnesses, joggers, dog walkers, couples taking romantic strolls. Someone had to see something strange." Navarro nodded, already flipping open his own notepad. "And the river," he said. "If someone dumped the case from a boat or upstream, we need sonar teams scouring every square inch of the riverbed." On the far side of the park, families and morning joggers who had been pushed back behind the barricades whispered to one another. Hushed rumors of a serial killer, a gang initiation, or some gruesome conspiracy spread like wildfire. Seamus, still clutching his blanket, looked up at the detectives as they moved from one clue to the next with intense focus. Turning to himself, he muttered, "I always thought this park was safe. 20 years keeping it clean, and now, I don't think Hudson will ever feel the same again. And Seamus wasn't wrong. For all the steel professionalism of the investigators, the echoes of Hudson Park's peace were long gone, immediately replaced by a creeping darkness. All roads pointed to one chilling reality. Someone out there was capable of the unthinkable. And this was only the beginning. Discovery of more body parts. As the morning turned to early afternoon, the investigation at Hudson Park was in full swing. Police officers canvassed the area, speaking to park regulars, joggers, and anyone who might have seen something out of the ordinary. Meanwhile, a second forensics team expanded the search radius along the riverbank, carefully combing through every bush, patch of grass, and shadowed nook in search of additional clues. At 2:35 p.m., Officer Jamie Daniels radioed in from a location roughly 200 yards downriver from the initial site. Her voice cracked with urgency over the comms. "Detective Bennett, we've got something here. You're gonna want to see this." Detectives Bennett and King arrived at the scene alongside a small team of forensic technicians. This time, the discovery wasn't hidden in bushes or camouflaged beneath dew-streaked ferns. It was another suitcase, identical to the first, drenched from proximity to the water, resting half-submerged in the muck along the riverbank. Bennett crouched down, her sharp gaze scanning the edges of the case. Unlike the first suitcase, this one was covered in muddy streaks, suggesting it had drifted through the shallows of the river before coming to rest against a cluster of reeds. But, much like its grim counterpart, the suitcase's latch was sealed shut with duct tape that clung desperately to its edges despite the damp. "Get the cameras over here," Bennett ordered, nodding toward the forensic photographer. "And someone bring bolt cutters. I'm not waiting to guess what's in this one." Within minutes the team had the suitcase opened, and the sense of dread that hung heavily in the air became suffocating. Like the first, this case contained human remains, but the contents sent a fresh wave of horror rippling through those gathered. Inside were the victim's upper torso and arms, folded grotesquely to fit within the confines of the suitcase. The skin was marred by faint bruises and incisions carefully stitched together, a chilling attempt to conceal the body's violent dismemberment. Navarro, who had arrived shortly after the discovery, stood with his arms crossed tightly, his face contorted in distaste. "Jesus," he whispered, shaking his head. "They didn't just kill her. They mutilated her." Bennett remained stone-faced, though her knuckles whitened as she clenched the pen in her hand. "No blood inside again," she observed. "Whoever did this is methodical. Victim was drained or wrapped post-mortem. They knew what they were doing." "Do we have fingerprints to work with?" King asked, gesturing toward the victim's hands. Unlike the lower half of the body found earlier, these remains were somewhat preserved by the airtight wrapping. The victim's hands, while pale and lifeless, appeared intact. "We'll try," answered Dr. Evelyn Cruz, the forensic pathologist on site. "Depending on environmental factors, we might get lucky, but the river water wouldn't have done the tissue any favors." One of the forensic technicians approached, holding up a small Ziploc bag, containing what appeared to be a soggy piece of paper pulled from inside the lining of the suitcase. "Detective Bennett," he called, earning her immediate attention. "This was wedged in one of the creases. It's soaked, but it looks like—" He held the bag closer for her inspection. "A retail barcode? Maybe part of a shipping label?" "Good," Bennett nodded, carefully taking the bag with gloved hands. "If we're lucky, this holds enough information for us to trace where the suitcase was purchased, or potentially even shipped from." King tilted his head, frowning slightly. "It's a stretch, but it's something." "It's all we've got," Bennett quipped, rising to her feet. "Until we ID the victim and figure out who might want her dead, everything's a lead. We follow it all." As the crime scene techs continued their meticulous sweep of the second suitcase and its surroundings, Bennett excused herself, her mind already racing ahead. She headed toward the small makeshift command center that had been set up by the NYPD along the perimeter of the park. Inside, missing persons reports from the past 6 months had been printed and pinned to a corkboard, an ever-growing mosaic of faces that told the stories of countless tragedies waiting to be unraveled. "Anything yet?" Bennett asked sharply, leaning over the desk where an analyst was painstakingly comparing the recovered fingerprints to entries in national and state databases. The analyst shook her head, her expression tight with concentration. "Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. If she's in the system, we'll find her." Returning to the riverside, Bennett found Navarro standing over a topo map of the area, muttering something to himself. He looked up as she approached, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. "You know the odds of this being random are basically zero, right? 2 identical suitcases, 2 different locations, and both with parts of the same victim? Whoever did this wanted us to find her, they wanted this attention. Bennett exhaled sharply, her tone turning steely. Then they've got it. And if they're watching us now, I hope they know this. When we catch them, they're not going to get the spotlight thereafter. They're going to get life behind bars. King stepped into the fray, holding a phone aloft. "We've got an update," he said, his usual casual demeanor replaced with a rare edge of seriousness. Fingerprint match came back. The victim's name is Rebecca Lin, 28, a Chinese-American immigrant with no criminal record. Last known residence is a rental unit in downtown Manhattan. Landlord reported her missing 3 days ago. Bennett's brow furrowed. 3 days, she repeated. That gives us a starting point, and narrows down our timeline. The pieces of the mystery were starting to fall into place, but with every step forward, the sinister web of the case only seemed to grow more tangled. Who had killed Rebecca Lin, and more importantly, why had they gone to such calculated lengths to scatter her remains across the park? One thing, however, was certain. Whoever was responsible for this heinous crime had made a grave mistake in underestimating the resolve of Detective Bennett and her team. Hudson Park had become a hub of darkness and intrigue, and the hunt was now fully underway. Emily Tran, a life full of determination. Emily Tran came to America chasing the promise of a better future, much like countless others who had dreamed of making it in the land of opportunity. Born into a humble family in Vietnam, she was the second of 3 children. From a young age, Emily displayed a remarkable work ethic and an unshakable determination to improve the lives of those around her. Her family often said that Emily had an aura of resilience far beyond her 25 years. 2 years prior to her tragic death, Emily arrived in New York as part of a work exchange program. She quickly found employment in a manufacturing plant on the outskirts of the city, where she worked tirelessly assembling circuit boards for electronic devices. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and more importantly, it allowed her to send money back home to support her aging parents and 2 younger siblings still in Vietnam. Emily led a frugal life. Her small apartment in Queens was sparsely furnished, just a single bed, a desk stacked with notebooks and letters from her family, and a simple set of cookware she used to prepare the traditional Vietnamese dishes she missed so much. Her colleagues at the factory would often joke that she was the most low-maintenance person they had ever met. "Emily doesn't spend on herself," one co-worker had said during a police interview. "Every penny she earns goes directly to her family. She talked about them all the time, especially her little brother. She wanted to make sure he could go to school and have a better life than she did." Despite her modest means, Emily invested in herself in the one way she believed mattered most: education. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after grueling 10-hour shifts at the factory, Emily attended English classes at a nearby community center. Her instructors described her as enthusiastic and deeply committed to mastering the language, even staying late to review material with the other students. Her dream? To become a certified tour guide in New York City, where she could combine her growing love for her adopted home and her passion for meeting people from around the world. "She was always asking questions," said Miss Patel, one of Emily's instructors. "Not just about English, but about history and culture. She wanted to know the stories behind the landmarks, why the Statue of Liberty mattered, what made Central Park so special. She wasn't settling for just scraping by, she was planning for her future." But Emily's story wasn't all about work and ambition. Beneath her diligent exterior was a warm and optimistic soul who made a lasting impression on everyone she met. Her co-workers noted her kindness and willingness to help others, whether it meant covering for someone during a family emergency or staying after hours to help fix a production error. Emily didn't have a selfish bone in her body, another co-worker told police. She always had this radiant smile that made you think, how is she so positive when life seems so hard for her? She carried hope in a way a lot of us forgot how to. Emily's unwavering optimism was rooted in her belief that her hard work would eventually pay off, not just for herself but for those she loved the most. She kept a journal where she wrote down her dreams, plans, and milestones. Police would later retrieve this journal from her apartment, its pages filled with detailed to-do lists. The mention of Louis in her journal referred to her boss's 5-year-old son, whom Emily would sometimes babysit while his parents worked late. It wasn't part of her job description, but Emily treated it as a way to earn extra money, and to bond with a child she adored. However, despite her vibrant personality, Emily's life wasn't free from challenges. As an immigrant navigating the insular, often cutthroat world of factory work, Emily had her fair share of struggles. Some of the older, more jaded employees dismissed her positivity as naive. Rumors spread about her alleged favoritism with the factory management, fueled by jealousy over her recent promotion. Emily rarely addressed the gossip. She simply worked harder, confident that her actions would speak for themselves. Still, one relationship raised eyebrows among her coworkers: her interactions with Michael Carter, a 45-year-old factory supervisor. At the outset, Michael appeared to take a liking to Emily because of her diligence and willingness to go above and beyond. He frequently praised her work during team meetings, and even recommended her for the promotion she received 6 months before her death. "She caught on to things so quickly," Michael had said in one company newsletter shortly after Emily's promotion. "Emily is a great example of what happens when you focus on doing the best job you can day in and day out." Publicly, it seemed like Michael had nothing but admiration for Emily's potential. Privately, however, co-workers began to notice the way Michael seemed to single Emily out for late-night meetings or private conversations. While Emily never vocally complained, her closest friend at the factory, Maria Gonzalez, would later reveal to authorities that Emily had confided in her about feeling uneasy. "She never said he did anything outright," Maria said tearfully during one interview, but she mentioned that he crossed the line a few times, little things like brushing up against her in ways that didn't feel accidental or calling her sweetheart when they were alone in the office. "She tried to laugh it off, but I could tell it bothered her." Emily's vague discomfort with Michael turned into real concern when she found out that several co-workers suspected she had been romantically involved with him. The whispers behind her back grew louder after her promotion, and Emily, determined to clear her name, approached Michael directly in private to ask him to address the rumors. Her journal entry from that night was one of her last. "Spoke to Michael today, asked if he could help stop the gossip. He kind of laughed and said it would die down on its own. I don't believe him." Unknown to Emily, her relationship with Michael, and his reaction to being questioned, would set events in motion that would ultimately lead to her untimely and gruesome death. But until her final days, Emily maintained the dignity, ambition, and heart of someone who never wavered in her belief that the future could be brighter, even if she couldn't see how. Those who knew her would later describe her as a light extinguished far too soon, a reminder of how dreams and determination can be both a gift and a curse in a world that doesn't always play fair. Emily Tran's legacy wasn't just one of tragedy, it was of resilience, hope, and the haunting question of what more she might have achieved if given the chance. A troubling workplace dynamic. As investigators delved deeper into Emily Tran's life, one particular thread began to stand out: her relationship with Michael Carter, a 45-year-old factory supervisor. On the surface, Michael appeared to be a well-liked, family-oriented man. Married with 2 teenage daughters, he carried himself with the charisma of a seasoned professional, and was often described as approachable and fair by his colleagues. But beneath this polished exterior, his connection with Emily raised more and more red flags. Michael seemed to take a keen interest in Emily almost from the moment she started at the factory. As a new hire, Emily's diligence and work ethic naturally set her apart from the rest of her peers. She often volunteered for overtime shifts and tackled the most tedious assembly tasks without complaint. Noticing this, Michael began assigning her to higher-profile projects in the factory and publicly praised her work during team meetings. "She's got potential," Michael frequently told others. "Emily's exactly the kind of employee we need more of here, focused, hard-working, and easy to work with." But that attention, in hindsight, bordered on excessive. Several of Emily's co-workers noted that Michael had started to single her out, calling her into his office for late-night one-on-one meetings, or requesting her specifically for last-minute overtime. While Emily initially dismissed it as Michael's appreciation for her dedication, murmurs around the factory began to paint a different picture. People started whispering that something was going on between them. Maria Gonzalez, Emily's closest friend at the factory, later told detectives, "It wasn't just the way Michael gave her special treatment, it was the looks he gave her, the way he always seemed to find an excuse to talk to her when no one else was around." Emily didn't really see it at first, but the rest of us noticed. Emily's co-workers recalled instances where Michael lingered near her workstation unnecessarily, or found small reasons to lean over her as she worked. "You'd think he was just being helpful until you saw him do it repeatedly," one witness remarked. "With her, but not anyone else." For months, Michael's behavior seemed relatively harmless. Awkward, overbearing at times, but nothing that crossed a clear line. That changed when Michael recommended Emily for a promotion to team lead, a position that many believed should have gone to a veteran employee. The announcement stirred resentment among her colleagues, fueling rumors that her advancement was more due to favoritism or a personal relationship with Michael than merit. "She earned that promotion," Maria Gonzalez insisted. "I won't let anyone say otherwise. She worked harder than anyone and deserved every bit of recognition she got, but I also knew how much those rumors hurt her. It crushed her to think people believed she would stoop so low." Emily tried to ignore the whispers at first, choosing to focus on her work and her family rather than the negativity swirling around her. But when the rumors turned into direct confrontations, she had no choice but to address it. On more than one occasion, co-workers made snide remarks within her earshot. Maria remembered an incident in the break room just weeks before Emily's death. Someone said something like, "It must be nice to have the boss on your side," with this nasty tone. Emily just turned and walked out. She didn't want to make a scene, but I could tell how upset she was. She hated the idea anyone thought she was taking advantage, or being taken advantage of. Behind closed doors, Emily confided in Maria about her unease around Michael. She didn't think he'd do anything horrible, not at first, Maria recalled through tears. But she did say there were moments that felt off. Like when he grabbed her shoulder a little too long while joking, or when he started calling her sweetheart when they were alone in his office. Michael's behavior took an even more troubling turn in the weeks leading up to Emily's disappearance. He began texting her after hours under the pretense of discussing work, a move that Emily found increasingly uncomfortable. "She told me she didn't know how to handle it," Maria admitted. "Emily wasn't the kind of person to make waves, especially not with someone in authority, but I begged her to document everything just in case it got worse." Finally, the tension reached its breaking point. Frustrated by the swirling rumors and determined to protect her reputation, Emily decided to confront Michael directly. She asked to meet him one evening in his office after hours, a choice that would later haunt everyone who knew her. "She felt like it was the only way to clear the air," Maria explained. "She told me she just wanted him to make a statement to the team, something that would shut down all the gossip. But I could tell she was scared." Emily's own words, chronicled in her journal, painted a vivid picture of that fateful night. "Spoke to Michael today. It didn't feel right. He laughed when I brought up the rumors. Told me they'd die down if I stayed professional. Why won't he just put an end to this? Why won't he help?" Unknown to Emily, that conversation would mark the beginning of the end. Days after their meeting, she would vanish. Her co-workers, already suspicious, immediately pointed to Michael as someone who might know more than he let on. "Everyone assumed he was too smooth to do something extreme," one co-worker said grimly during questioning. "But looking back, there were signs. We just didn't connect them in time." Michael, for his part, seemed unfazed when questioned by police in the days following Emily's disappearance. He dismissed their relationship as strictly professional, and insisted he had no knowledge of her plans or whereabouts. But detectives weren't convinced. Their attention turned to his alibis and his home for answers. Michael's connection to Emily wasn't just inappropriate, it was the key to unraveling the darker truth behind her gruesome death. Evidence found at Michael Carter's home. When the investigators began piecing together the events surrounding Emily Tran's disappearance and murder, it did not take long for Michael Carter's name to rise to the top of their suspect list. The rumors, the inappropriate work dynamic, and his evasive behavior during questioning all painted a damning picture. However, it wasn't until they obtained a search warrant for his home and vehicle that the case truly began to unravel. The search, carried out early on a chilly Wednesday morning, was exhaustive. Detective Laura Bennett spearheaded the effort, accompanied by her partner Marcus King, a team of uniformed officers and several forensic experts. The modest suburban home Michael shared with his wife and 2 teenage daughters stood in sharp contrast to the dark secrets it held inside. Bennett's instincts had been razor-sharp from the beginning. Michael's calm demeanor during questioning felt rehearsed, almost too controlled, and when they found inconsistencies in his work logs and alibis during the time frame Emily was last seen, they knew they were on the verge of something significant. As they stepped into the home, Bennett's sharp eyes immediately scanned the surroundings with a mixture of calculated focus and restrained disgust. The living room looked too perfect, like a staged scene, sterile and devoid of the chaos one might expect from a family with children. There were family photos on the wall, portraying Michael as a doting husband and father, but Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that behind those smiling faces, something much darker was lurking. "Room by room," Bennett ordered, her voice crisp. "Bag and catalog everything unusual, no matter how small." It didn't take long for the team to uncover their first red flag. In the garage, amidst a collection of tools and storage boxes, officers discovered a hunting knife with traces of what appeared to be dried blood along the blade. It was carefully wrapped in a rag and tucked away in a toolbox that seemed largely untouched. "Get that sent to the lab ASAP," Bennett instructed, snapping on a pair of gloves to examine the knife more closely. "If this belongs to Emily, we've got him." Next came the discovery of a roll of heavy-duty duct tape, identical to the type used to seal the suitcases containing Emily's remains. It might have been an innocent item on its own, but combined with the circumstances it raised alarm bells. In the kitchen, Michael's wife stood nervously with her arms crossed, repeatedly insisting that she knew nothing about Emily Tran or her husband's possible connection to the case. "We don't even use duct tape for anything," she added helplessly, her voice trembling as Bennett gave her a cold, hard stare. "Where are the black trash bags?" Detective King suddenly asked, pulling open a cabinet under the sink. His tone was direct, almost accusatory. "Black trash bags, like garden bags?" Michael's wife stammered. I don't know. He might keep some in the basement or the garage. He handles all of that." The team followed her lead, descending into the dimly lit basement. There, hidden behind stacks of old paint cans and seasonal decorations, they found them. Large black garbage bags, the same brand and size that matched those used to wrap Emily's remains. On closer inspection, one of the bags had faint tear marks and an unmistakable substance stuck to the inner lining, which under the harsh beam of a forensic flashlight appeared to be small bloodstains. More officers combing through the property swept the upstairs bedrooms where they came across Michael's office. While the other parts of the house carried an air of sterile normalcy, the office was chaotic. Papers scattered, drawers half opened, and a faint scent of sweat lingering in the air. On his desk, an investigator discovered a notebook containing crude sketches of suitcases. Alongside the drawings were hastily scribbled notes about measurements, weights, and materials, as though Michael had been practicing how best to conceal and transport what he knew to be horrifying cargo. Then came the most critical find: Michael's truck. The vehicle, which Michael had frantically insisted he only used for work purposes, became an immediate focal point for investigators. Its bed was lined with scratches indicative of heavy objects being dragged across its surface, and small traces of dirt and foliage similar to the riverbank where Emily's remains were discovered clung to the tires and undercarriage. But nothing was as damning as what they found in the back seat. Faint blood smears on the upholstery, and a single long strand of dark hair tangled in the fabric of the seatbelt. Bennett's pulse quickened as she examined the scene. "King!" she called, stepping back from the truck. "Bag everything! Every hair, every fiber, every speck of blood! Process the hell out of this thing!" King nodded, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced with grim determination. "We've got him," he said. "We can link this truck to her. I know it." Forensic specialists immediately set to work, collecting swabs from the bloodstains and carefully extracting the hair for DNA analysis. Within hours, preliminary tests came back positive. The blood was human. "I want full DNA confirmation," Bennett said, though it was clear from the tone of her voice that, in her mind, the case was all but closed. Later that evening, with the evidence mounting against him, Michael Carter was brought into custody. As he sat in the cold, sterile interrogation room, Bennett and King laid the findings before him piece by piece: the blood on the knife, the duct tape, the trash bags, the hair in his truck, and the damning notebook from his office. Michael's calm facade began to crack. His jaw tightened, his eyes darting back and forth as he struggled to maintain his composure. When King leaned in, summarizing in one sentence what must have been weighing heavily on Michael's mind, the tension in the room was palpable. "You planned this," King said firmly. "Every detail. You thought you could cover your tracks, but you made mistakes. Mistakes we're going to use to make sure you never walk free again." The evidence collected from Michael's home and truck provided the investigators with the indisputable connection they needed. Each item was a piece of the puzzle that painted an incriminating picture of a man who had meticulously planned a gruesome act, but had underestimated the depth of the investigation. For Bennett, it was another step forward in the harrowing process of bringing justice to Emily Tran. Still, she couldn't shake the weight of the case, a young woman full of hope and potential, who had trusted the wrong person in a world that had failed to protect her. "We'll nail him," she muttered under her breath, "for her and for everyone who deserves better." And with every new finding, justice for Emily grew closer. Michael confesses but denies the crime. The sterile air of the NYPD interrogation room felt heavier as Michael Carter sat across from detectives Laura Bennett and Marcus King. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking time, but to Michael it might as well have been a countdown to his unraveling. He sat hunched over, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as though trying to shield himself from the towering weight of the evidence stacked against him. "Let me remind you," Bennett began, her tone sharp as her gaze cut through the tension in the room. "You're here because of mounting evidence that connects you to the disappearance and murder of Emily Tran. You've had all day to think about this, Michael. Anything you want to tell us?" Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat but avoided looking directly at her. His once self-assured demeanor had been replaced by visible cracks of unease. He shook his head, his voice measured but shaking slightly. "I've already told you, I had nothing to do with that. Emily, she was a good worker, a good person." King leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and a look of frustrated disbelief on his face. He glanced at Bennett before interjecting, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Good person, huh? Is that why she ended up in pieces, stuffed into 2 suitcases, both of which you just so happen to own the exact same model of? Spare me the condolences. What happened, Michael? Walk us through it." Michael's jaw clenched as he inhaled deeply, visibly trying to steady himself. He adjusted his posture, leaning forward slightly. "Look, I'm not saying I didn't know Emily. We had a professional relationship, okay? But I didn't kill her." Bennett tilted her head, her eyebrows raised in mock curiosity. "Professional relationship?" she repeated slowly, her tone icy. "Interesting. Because you've got coworkers saying you paid way more attention to her than anyone else in that factory. Should we talk about those late-night meetings in your office? Or the fact that you started texting her after hours?" "It wasn't like that." Michael's voice raised slightly, his frustration spilling out. "I was trying to mentor her. She was ambitious, hard-working. You don't see that kind of drive every day. I thought she deserved the promotion." King couldn't hold back a snort of laughter. "Mentor?" he echoed. "Is that what you call it now? Funny, because Emily's co-workers told us she didn't feel too comfortable around you, especially when you started calling her sweetheart during those mentoring sessions. And let's not forget the evidence we found in your house and truck. Care to explain the blood, the duct tape, the trash bags, or should we move straight to sentencing?" Michael's face paled at King's words, his breathing becoming shallower. His fingers twitched nervously, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Listen," his voice cracked slightly. "I'll admit I crossed the line a couple of times. Maybe I got too comfortable. Maybe I said or did things that could be misunderstood, but that doesn't mean I killed her." Bennett slammed a folder onto the table, causing Michael to flinch slightly. She opened it methodically, revealing photographs of the evidence. The blood-stained knife, the trash bags with matching tear patterns, the hair stuck to the seatbelt of his truck. One by one she slid them across the table toward him. "These things don't lie, Michael," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "Your fingerprints are all over this. And don't forget about the surveillance footage of you, yes you, at the ATM draining Emily Tran's bank account the day after she disappeared. Disguised or not, we know it was you. Are you really going to sit there and tell me this is all just one big misunderstanding?" The mention of the ATM footage seemed to strike a nerve. Michael looked up, panic flashing through his eyes. "That wasn't what it looked like," he stammered. Emily gave me her card. She was upset. She was talking about leaving, about how she couldn't take the pressure anymore. She asked me to withdraw that money for her. She trusted me." King leaned forward, his voice rising slightly as he pressed on. "You expect us to believe Emily willingly handed over her bank card and PIN to you? You, the same guy she'd been trying to avoid at work? Stop wasting our time, Michael." Michael exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair and dragging a hand down his face. For a few moments the room was silent except for the ticking clock. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter this time. "Fine, I'll admit I was there. That night." His voice trailed off and he glanced between Bennett and King before continuing. "Emily came to my office. She wanted to talk about the rumors, about how everyone thought she got that promotion because of me. She was emotional. I tried to calm her down, but she just kept saying she couldn't handle it anymore." Bennett's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through the tension. "And then what, Michael? Did she ask for your help cutting herself up into parts and dumping her in the river? Spare me this pity story, you're already on thin ice." "No!" he shouted, his voice trembling. "I didn't kill her. I swear to God she ran out and I didn't see her after that. I didn't know what happened until I saw it on the news. I panicked. I didn't want to be dragged into this." King scoffed, shaking his head. "Sure, Michael, except for the part where our evidence keeps dragging you into it. You panicked so much you forgot to toss the murder weapon and clean up the mess in your truck." Michael buried his face in his hands, groaning in frustration. "You don't understand," he whispered hoarsely. I made mistakes, okay? I lied about a few things, but I'm not a killer. Someone set me up." Set you up, Bennett repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Let me guess. Someone broke into your house, used your duct tape, your truck, your knife, and carefully orchestrated all of this just to frame you. You're going to need a better story than that, Michael. He looked up at her, desperation written all over his face. You have to believe me, he pleaded. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just trying to help her. I didn't want her to... His voice broke and he leaned back, staring at the ceiling as though searching for something he couldn't find. Bennett stood up, shaking her head as she gathered the folder in front of her. You better make up your mind, Michael, she said coldly. You've admitted to everything except the part we already know you're guilty of. We'll let the jury decide what they believe. As she walked toward the door, King followed, pausing just long enough to lean over the table and deliver one final blow. You thought you could outsmart us, but you were sloppy. You left a trail and now you're caught. The sooner you come clean, the sooner this ends for you. Michael said nothing, his gaze fixed on the photographs spread before him. For the first time, his carefully maintained lies began to crumble as reality set in. The evidence was airtight and no amount of denial or misdirection would save him now. The stolen bank card. The break in the case came when detectives discovered a troubling financial anomaly in Emily Tran's otherwise meticulous records. A day after Emily was reported missing, her bank account, which she meticulously maintained to send money back home to Vietnam, had been emptied. Investigators obtained the account's transaction history and quickly zeroed in on 2 suspicious withdrawals made back-to-back at an ATM near Emily's workplace. Detective Laura Bennett leaned over the desk inside the NYPD's Financial Crimes Unit, glaring at the text on the screen in front of her. 2 withdrawals, she muttered to herself, her mind running scenarios. She turned to the analyst beside her. How much are we talking here? $700 total, the analyst replied. 2 transactions, the maximum allowable amount for the day. It's nearly all the cash she had in this checking account. What about the timestamps? Detective Marcus King interjected, sipping out of his lukewarm coffee while studying the monitor. The analyst clicked a few buttons, pulling up the ATM logs. First transaction was at 11:12 p.m. Second one happened exactly 2 minutes later at 11:14 p.m. Bennett's eyes narrowed. Middle of the night, within minutes of each other, whoever did this knew they had to act fast. Almost like they knew they shouldn't be seen. Did cameras catch anything? The analyst nodded and brought up footage from the ATM's security camera, the pixelated video instantly filling the screen. The detectives leaned in as the time-stamped recording began. The grainy black and white footage showed a figure stepping up to the ATM. From the top-down angle, the hooded individual was almost unrecognizable. A baseball cap and a scarf covered their face, leaving little more than their body language to study. Smart, King remarked dryly. They knew the camera was there. But no one's that careful, Bennett countered, her sharp gaze focused intently on the screen. Rewind that 10 seconds. Let's look at how they approached the machine. Did they walk from the parking lot or the alley? The analyst reversed the footage to moments before the figure stepped up to the ATM. As the video rewound, a brief glimpse of a vehicle pulling into the frame caught Bennett's attention. It stopped near the curb, its license plate obscured by the angle, but the shape of the car was clear as day, a mid-sized truck. Bennett slammed her pen onto the table. Pause it there, the analyst obliged, freezing the frame as a shadowy outline of the truck lingered in the background. That look familiar to you? Bennett asked King, who squinted at the screen. Sure does, King nodded. It's the same make and model as Michael Carter's truck. The room went silent for a beat as the realization sunk in. Bennett broke the silence with a sharp inhale. He's careful but not careful enough, she said, her tone equal parts frustration and determination. It's him, it has to be him. If we can tie Michael to this truck at that ATM at that time, it's over. This places him right in the middle of the crime. They continued analyzing the footage, and soon, another crucial detail emerged. Just as the figure finished withdrawing money and turned away from the ATM, their scarf shifted slightly, exposing a part of their chin. Though it was faint, the detectives could make out a patch of stubble, something Emily wouldn't have had, eliminating any chance this was a mere coincidence or that Emily herself had made the withdrawal voluntarily. King let out a low whistle, turning toward Bennett. Guess their disguise wasn't as good as they thought. Bennett nodded, scribbling a note in her pad. Let's get this frame enhanced. I don't care if it takes all night to clean up that image. We need as much clarity as possible to link this directly to Michael. Beyond the footage, the pattern of the withdrawals raised even more red flags. Investigators looked into the ATM's timestamps and realized that the suspect had seemingly known how much Emily kept in her account. With surgical precision they withdrew just under her total balance, 700, leaving a mere 700, leaving a mere 2.13. The withdrawals left detectives asking one clear question: how would Michael have known Emily's exact PIN code unless she had given it under duress, or unless he forced her somehow? The forensic team didn't stop there. They subpoenaed software logs from Emily's bank, revealing that her PIN had been entered correctly on the first attempt during both transactions. This detail was crucial. It suggested not a guess, but knowledge of her personal information. Coercion, Bennett muttered later in the office. There's no way she gave that information freely. Either he forced her to give it, or... Her voice trailed off as another darker scenario came to mind. King finished her thought. Or he already had her locked up, or worse. Their suspicions grew further when bank logs revealed that Emily's account hadn't been accessed in 18 months before these transactions. She used her savings religiously for wire transfers to her family, often scheduling them days in advance. The sudden activity, after such a consistent history, was as glaring as a red flag could be. Bennett and King worked tirelessly to build the case. They used mobile phone data to place Michael's device in the vicinity of the ATM that night, further tightening the noose around his ever-weakening alibi. Additionally, gas station surveillance near the bank proved helpful. Although initially overlooked, one grainy clip spotted the same truck stopping briefly at a nearby pump. By the time Michael was back in the interrogation room, Bennett wasn't bothering with small talk. She came in with a folder and a look that could pierce through steel. "You drained her account," she said flatly, tossing printed stills from the ATM footage across the table. "And before you try to lie, don't even think about saying it wasn't you." Michael glanced down at the pictures, his face remaining stoic, though his fidgeting hands betrayed him. "I already told you," he muttered, his voice strained. "She let me take the money. She wanted me to help her. Run away." "Bullshit," King interrupted, slapping his palm on the table. "She didn't touch her account for over a year, and you want us to believe she called you up in distress to drain it for her? Sure, Michael. What else did she run away with? Her arms and legs in suitcases?" Bennett leaned in, practically nose to nose with the suspect. "The evidence says you're lying. You were there. We can prove it. The truck, the footage, the withdrawals. Stop wasting our time and tell us what happened." Michael stammered, struggling to form coherent words as the walls closed in around him. The weight of the evidence couldn't be denied, and though he continued to insist Emily willingly gave him her PIN, even he knew the story was falling apart. "Her PIN, the money, none of it matters," Bennett finally said, standing up with an air of finality, "because what does matter is why she didn't make it past that night, and you know that better than anyone, Michael. That's what matters." The stolen card and the methodical, cold withdrawal of Emily's savings became another piece in the puzzle of Michael's guilt. It wasn't just a desperate action, it was calculated, deliberate, and damning. Piece by piece, with every new discovery, a clear and horrifying picture began to emerge. Michael's contradictory statements. Michael Carter's interrogation became a labyrinth of contradictions, half-truths, and desperate attempts to mislead investigators. From the moment detectives began questioning him, his story evolved and shifted like a tide, evidence in hand steadily eroding his lies one by one. Detective Laura Bennett was not one to tolerate inconsistencies. She sat across from Michael in the stark interrogation room, her gaze unwavering. "Michael, let me make one thing clear," she said, her tone sharp and focused. "Every time you change your story, every time you dodge a question, it screams guilt. So why don't we save everyone some time and tell the truth for once?" Michael sat hunched over, perspiration beading on his forehead as he exhaled deeply. "I told you already. I don't know what happened to Emily. I didn't kill her," he muttered. But his words lacked conviction, and they did little more than agitate the detectives. "She came to your office the night she went missing, correct?" Bennett leaned in, her voice calm yet threatening. "You told us before that you hadn't seen her in days, so which one is it, Michael?" Michael hesitated, his eyes darting toward the corner of the room, avoiding her gaze. "Okay, fine," he admitted with a shrug. "Yes, she came to my office. We talked about stuff, about the promotion, the rumors. She was upset. I don't know, she just stormed out. That's the last I saw her." Detective Marcus King, seated beside Bennett, raised an incredulous eyebrow. "Stormed out? And that's it? That's all you're going with?" He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Michael, you want us to believe that a woman who was upset, maybe even scared, just walked out of your office and somehow ended up in pieces inside suitcases at Hudson Park? That's a hell of a coincidence." Michael's jaw tightened. "I don't know what happened after she left," he snapped. "I didn't follow her. I didn't hurt her." Bennett leaned forward, flipping open a folder filled with witness testimony, forensic reports, and images from the crime scene. She placed a photo of Emily's remains in front of Michael. "This doesn't happen by accident," she said coldly. "You expect us to believe that someone else broke into your house, used your tools, your truck, and your duct tape, then framed you. Who would go to that kind of trouble, Michael?" "I don't know." Michael's voice cracked as he stood abruptly, his fists clenching at his sides. "Maybe someone's trying to set me up. You ever think of that?" King didn't flinch. "Sure, Michael," he said, his tone dripping with mock patience. "Someone just happened to know everything about your truck, used your garage for dismemberment practice, and then conveniently forgot to clean up the blood. Makes total sense." The tension in the room was palpable. Michael's story shifted again just minutes later when confronted with the forensic evidence. The knife found in his garage, bearing faint traces of dried blood that DNA tests proved belonged to Emily Tran, was an undeniable piece of the puzzle, but Michael refused to give up the lie without a fight. "That knife, you can't prove I used it!" Michael shouted, his voice hoarse with frustration. "It's just an old hunting knife. I've had it for years. Anyone could have planted that there. I didn't even know she was... You didn't know what, Michael?" Bennett shot back, her voice sharp. "You didn't know she wouldn't make it home? But you knew enough to wipe down your truck and leave blood smeared on the seatbelt? Or maybe you're going to tell us random strangers also used your truck to transport suitcases to Hudson Park?" Michael's head dropped into his hands, his fingers clutching at his scalp. "I shouldn't have lied about seeing her that night," he admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I panicked, okay? When I saw the news about her, I panicked, and I didn't know what to say." Bennett crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. "You panicked," she repeated flatly. "You panicked when? Before or after you drained her bank account? Before or after you cleaned the blood from your truck?" "That wasn't me," Michael insisted, his desperation mounting. "She gave me her bank card. She wanted me to help her. She was talking about leaving. She said she couldn't take it anymore. She begged me to take the money out for her." "Oh, please," King groaned, slamming his hand on the table. The loud thud caused Michael to flinch. "Give us a break. You think anyone's buying that story? That she willingly handed over her card, her PIN, and then just disappeared? Stop playing dumb, Michael." "Enough with the lies," Bennett added, her voice steely. "Do you know what's working against you? You're inconsistent. First, you've barely seen her. Then suddenly you're in her life enough to know how much money she has. Your fingerprints are on the knife. There's blood in your truck. You were caught on camera at the ATM withdrawing her money the night after she went missing. I don't need a confession to prove you did this." Michael's shoulders slumped, his body visibly deflating under the weight of their words. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he muttered, almost inaudibly. "It was an accident. I just wanted to help her." Bennett's eyes narrowed. "An accident? Dismembering her and dumping her remains in suitcases was an accident?" She shook her head in disbelief. "You're not fooling anyone, Michael. You didn't just panic. You calculated every move. You thought you could get away with this." "I didn't want this!" Michael shouted suddenly, his voice cracking with emotion. "I didn't want any of this to happen. I just wanted her to stop making me look bad." That moment hung in the silence of the room, his words echoing in the detective's ears. Bennett and King exchanged a knowing glance. Michael's slip of anger had revealed more than enough. "You just wanted her to stop making you look bad," Bennett repeated softly, leaning forward with laser-like focus. "So you killed her, didn't you, Michael?" Michael shook his head violently, his teeth gritted in defiance. "I don't know what happened to her," he murmured, but for the first time his voice wavered with doubt, as if even he was beginning to struggle with the layers of lies he'd told. The interrogation continued for hours, an exhausting back and forth of denials and half-admissions. While Michael refused to fully confess, each contradiction, each desperate attempt to explain away the evidence, only tightened the noose around him. His story had no coherence, no structure, just a web of weak excuses that fell apart under the weight of the truth. By the end, Michael was visibly broken. His unwillingness to admit guilt outright, paired with the overwhelming evidence against him, left the detectives with the understanding that no matter how long they pushed, he might never offer an honest confession. But they didn't need one. The case against Michael was airtight, strengthened by each new inconsistency in his statements. For Detectives Bennett and King, his lies became the rope that would ultimately secure him a life behind bars, and for Emily Tran, it was a step closer to justice. The letter that decoded the mystery. One of the most startling breakthroughs in Emily Tran's case came not from forensic labs or surveillance footage, but from a simple handwritten letter discovered in her apartment. It was tucked away in a plain envelope inside a drawer of Emily's small wooden desk, buried under neatly folded papers and notebooks. Though its plain exterior gave no indication of importance, the contents of the letter brought a chilling clarity to the motives behind her tragic death. The discovery was nearly overlooked during the initial search of Emily's apartment. Detective Bennett, always methodical, had requested every inch of her hard-earned and modest home be combed for clues. It wasn't until an evidence technician rifled through the desk drawers and found the envelope, addressed to myself, that its significance became apparent. "Detective Bennett, you might want to see this," the technician said as she handed over the slightly crumpled envelope. Bennett carefully slid the letter out, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the handwriting. The letter began with words that immediately struck her. "If anything happens to me." Michael King, standing nearby, placed his coffee down on the counter. "She left a note? Why do I feel like her intuition just did half our job for us?" "Because maybe it did," Bennett replied, already absorbed in the text of the letter. "Let's listen to what Emily has to say." As Bennett read aloud, the pieces began falling into place in a way that was as haunting as it was illuminating. "Dear me. Something doesn't feel right. Not in my heart, not in my gut. I don't know when I started feeling like this, but it's getting worse every day. Maybe I'm just imagining things, or maybe I'm scared for a good reason. Either way, I need to write this down, even if I never show it to anyone. Maybe it's for me, or maybe it's my way of making sure someone knows the truth if I'm not here anymore." Michael has been acting strange. He's always been in my corner, at least that's what he wanted me to believe. At the start I thought he genuinely just admired my work or thought I was a good employee, but over time, I can see how wrong I've been. It's the way he watches me when he doesn't think I notice. It's the way he calls me into his office for things that could be said in an email, and worst of all, it's the way he doesn't take no for an answer when I tell him I'm too tired to stay late. Bennett paused briefly, her brow furrowing deeply. "She knew something was off. She could sense it," she murmured, then continued reading. "The rumors in the factory make it worse. People think I'm his favorite, that I've been doing things to earn my promotion. All I've been doing is working harder than everyone else, but who cares about the truth? It's easier to believe lies. Last week I asked Michael directly to speak up, to tell everyone there's nothing going on between us. I thought he'd help clear things up, but he just laughed. He said gossip's like waves, it'll settle if you don't fight it. But I think he likes the rumors. Maybe he thinks it gives him power. Today he went too far. I stayed after my shift to finish the assembly reports for him, and when I brought them to his office, he wouldn't let me leave. The way he stood between me and the door, the things he said about how ungrateful I'd be if I didn't appreciate what he's done for me, I'll never forget it. I left as fast as I could. I've started looking up labor laws online. I hate the idea of making trouble, but I don't think this is going to stop until I go to HR or the police. I don't want to ruin his career. I don't even want to be part of this anymore. I just want to do my work, save my money, and go home to Vietnam someday. That's all I want. But the way he looks at me now, like some entitled monster who owns me, it makes me wonder if speaking out would just make things worse. Bennett stopped again, closing her eyes momentarily to draw in a deep breath. She knew she was in danger, she said quietly, the weight of the letter pressing down on her. King shook his head, leaning heavily on the desk. Michael knew she was thinking of going to HR or the cops. He must have overheard something or pieced it together, and instead of letting her go, he decided to shut her up for good. Bennett nodded grimly. This letter is more than just a diary, it's a roadmap to his motives. We've been focusing on his actions, but this is his motive in her own words. He knew she could destroy his life and career if she spoke up, and he couldn't risk it. The letter's final paragraph was the most chilling of all. Bennett's voice softened as she read it aloud. "If anything happens to me, someone needs to know it wasn't an accident. I know it sounds paranoid, but Michael has been pushing me further than I've ever been pushed before. He's controlling in ways that I didn't even see at first, and now I don't know if I can ever get away from him. I just want someone to know the truth, in case I can't say it myself. Yours truly, Emily." The room fell silent. King rubbed a hand over his face and exhaled sharply. "If we didn't already hate this guy enough, now he just looks worse. Emily flat out told us what was coming, and she couldn't scream loud enough for anyone to hear until now." Bennett folded the letter carefully and placed it in an evidence bag, her expression a mix of sadness and determination. "This is Emily's voice speaking from beyond the grave. She's telling us what happened, why it happened, and who made it happen. It's the missing piece we didn't know we needed. This isn't just evidence, King added, standing tall beside her. It's a damn confession, written by the victim, but signed by her murderer's actions. The letter became a critical piece of evidence in the case against Michael Carter. It painted a vivid picture of his escalating behavior, his controlling tendencies, and the fear Emily felt long before her murder. In conjunction with the physical evidence, witness testimony, and Michael's contradictions, it solidified the case into an airtight narrative. For Emily, the letter ensured her voice wouldn't be silenced. It spoke for her when she couldn't, and it served as a haunting reminder of the dangers she had sensed but couldn't escape. For the prosecutors, it was the key to unraveling the deeper motives behind Michael's horrifying actions. Her words are louder than his lies, Bennett said resolutely as she passed the letter to the prosecution team for the trial. This letter will make sure he doesn't weasel out of this. Not with a plea deal, not with excuses. For Emily, justice starts here. The trial and final verdict. The trial of Michael Carter quickly became one of the most high-profile legal battles New York had seen in years. The courtroom was packed with reporters, victim advocates, and members of the community who had been following Emily Tran's story. To most observers, the case seemed like an open and shut one, with overwhelming evidence tying Michael to the crime. But in the world of criminal justice, even a slam-dunk case had to tread carefully through the minefield of legal procedures, defense strategies, and jury deliberations. The trial began on a crisp Monday morning in the state Supreme Court. Judge Elena Whitaker presided, a stern but fair woman known for handling emotionally charged cases with poise. Although Michael Carter entered the courtroom wearing a neatly pressed suit and attempting to maintain an air of calm, his demeanor betrayed him. The slight tremble of his hands and the sweat gathering at his hairline did not go unnoticed. Sitting at the prosecution's table, Detective Laura Bennett watched stoically as the proceedings unfolded. For her and her partner, Detective Marcus King, Michael's conviction wasn't just about closing a case. It was about delivering justice for Emily Tran, a young woman whose bright future was extinguished far too soon. Opening statements, a tale of contradictions. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Monroe, opened with a quiet yet powerful statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, pacing slowly but confidently in front of the wooden jury box, "Emily Tran came to this country with dreams, hope, and the courage to build a life, not only for herself, but for her family back home. But those dreams were stolen from her, stolen by the man sitting in this courtroom today." She held up the letter Emily had written, carefully bagged in evidence, and gestured toward Michael. "This letter, written in her own hand, is Emily's voice, crying out from beyond the grave to tell you exactly who endangered her, who manipulated her, who ultimately took her life." Monroe detailed the timeline of Emily's death, weaving together the testimony of co-workers, forensic evidence, and Michael's mounting contradictions during police questioning. Her tone was direct, her words methodical. This was no accident, this was no misunderstanding, it was a premeditated act of violence driven by fear, control, and the inability to face his own destructive behavior. The defense attorney, Samuel Bretman, opened with a starkly different narrative. "The prosecution wants you to believe they have an airtight case," he said, gesturing expansively toward the jury. "But the truth is, this case is built on circumstantial evidence, speculation, and assumptions. My client, Michael Carter, is not the monster the prosecution is portraying. He is a respected supervisor, a family man, a devoted father. He is innocent of these charges." Bretman attempted to frame the case as one of misinterpretation and police bias, emphasizing the lack of direct evidence tying Michael to the actual killing. "Yes, my client was flawed. Yes, perhaps he made mistakes, but mistakes are not murder. You will see that the prosecution's case is riddled with doubt, and where there is doubt, there can be no conviction." Bennett, sitting in the gallery, exchanged a brief glance with King. "Doubt?" King muttered under his breath. "They're grasping at straws." The evidence unfolds. Over the course of the 2-week trial, the prosecution methodically presented the damning physical evidence. Forensic specialists took the stand to explain how Emily's fingerprints were found on the duct tape used around the suitcases, how the bloodstains in Michael's truck matched Emily's DNA, and how the hunting knife found in his garage bore faint traces of her blood. Each witness painted a clear picture of deliberate and calculated criminal actions. The ATM footage was shown to the jury depicting a hooded figure withdrawing Emily's money late at night. Forensic enhancement revealed stubble and faint facial features under the shadowed scarf, details that closely aligned with Michael Carter's appearance. Additionally, Michael's truck was conclusively identified in the footage captured idling near the ATM. Rachel Monroe called on Detective Bennett to testify about the investigation process and the inconsistencies in Michael's interrogation. Bennett, calm and measured, recounted his shifting narratives. First, he denied seeing Emily the night she disappeared. Then he admitted that she had come to his office. Later he admitted to withdrawing money from her account, claiming it was at her request. His story doesn't add up because it's not true. Perhaps the most impactful moment in the trial came when Monroe presented Emily's handwritten letter. The courtroom fell completely silent as the ADA read aloud Emily's haunting final words. "If anything happens to me, someone needs to know it wasn't an accident. Michael has been pushing me further than I've ever been pushed before." Members of the jury looked visibly shaken. One juror, a middle-aged woman, dabbed her eyes with a tissue. For many in the courtroom, hearing Emily's voice through her own writing was more compelling than any forensic evidence. The defense stumbles. The defense's approach was to shift blame and plant seeds of doubt. They suggested the possibility of a third-party perpetrator, theorizing that Emily may have been killed by a jealous co-worker, or even a stranger with personal grievances. Bretman argued that Michael's DNA could have been innocently transferred to the items in question, due to his regular proximity to Emily at work. "Correlation is not causation," he repeated like a mantra, attempting to deflect responsibility. But the defense's efforts unraveled when Michael took the stand in his own defense. While his attorney had advised against it, Michael insisted he wanted to clear his name. What followed was a disjointed testimony riddled with contradictions. He denied certain accusations outright, backpedaled on others, and even admitted to withholding information from the police out of fear. "I panicked," Michael said, his voice wavering under cross-examination. "I knew it looked bad, but I didn't kill her." "Then why?" Monroe pressed, her tone razor-sharp. "Did you clean blood from your truck's seatbelt? Why did you stop at an ATM and empty her account? Why was she so terrified of you that she wrote a letter predicting something exactly like this?" Michael stammered. I don't know. Someone must have set me up." Monroe shook her head. "The only person who set you up, Mr. Carter, is you." The jury's decision. After closing arguments were made, the case was handed over to the jury. The deliberation lasted 3 days, during which the weight of the evidence was scrutinized one final time. On the morning of the 4th day, the jury emerged, their foreperson holding the verdict form tightly in her hands. The courtroom was packed as Judge Whitaker read out the decision. "On the charge of first-degree murder, we, the jury, find the defendant, Michael Carter, guilty." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael's face fell, his previous defiance replaced with disbelief and despair. In the gallery, Emily's family, who had flown in from Vietnam, held on to each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. As sentencing followed, Michael was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Whitaker's voice was grim as she addressed him. "Your actions were calculated, sinister, and ultimately devastating. Emily Tran came to this country full of hope, and you extinguished that hope for your own selfish reasons. Justice has been served here today." Aftermath. Justice for Emily. Outside the courthouse, Detective Bennett stood with King, watching as reporters swarmed around the prosecution team. "We did it," King said, tossing his empty coffee cup into a nearby trash can. "Justice for Emily," Bennett replied softly. After a beat, she added, "I just wish we'd been able to hear her voice while she was still alive." King nodded. "At least her letter made sure the truth came out. She helped us even when she couldn't be here." The trial's conclusion marked the end of a harrowing chapter, but for Emily's family and those who had followed her story, it also symbolized justice, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, the truth will eventually find its way forward. Hard lessons from tragedy. The tragic case of Emily Tran may have ended in justice with the conviction of Michael Carter, but for her family, her community, and anyone who followed her story, the pain left behind served as an unsettling reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of everyday life. Her death became a cautionary tale, amplifying the need for awareness about workplace power dynamics, the importance of supporting victims of harassment, and how subtle warning signs can escalate into devastating outcomes when ignored. Detective Marcus King, leaning against the hood of his unmarked car, reflected on the case as reporters packed up their cameras and photographers snapped their final shots outside the courthouse. "You know," he began, gesturing to the courthouse steps where Emily's family stood speaking with a translator, "all she wanted was to help her family back in Vietnam. It's such a damn shame. She didn't deserve any of this." Laura Bennett stood beside him, arms crossed, her usually stoic demeanor tinged with sadness. "None of them ever do, King," she replied, her voice low. "But it's cases like this that remind us how far we still have to go. People think these things don't happen, that harassment in the workplace is just talk, harmless tension. They don't realize how quickly it can turn into something so much worse." Emily's legacy, a symbol of resilience. Emily Tran's story resonated deeply across communities, both among immigrants who saw a mirror of their own hopes and struggles in her, and among those who came to recognize that unchecked power in the workplace could lead to devastating consequences. At the heart of her story was a young woman who had arrived in America full of dreams, leading an unassuming life of quiet ambition. Her tireless work ethic and deep love for her family marked her as someone who carried hope even in dire circumstances. And yet, beneath her optimism, lay a growing storm of fear, one she had tried to navigate alone. King shook his head, his voice lowering. She tried to handle it herself. If even one person at that factory had stood up for her, maybe things would have been different. Bennett nodded slowly. That's part of the problem. Women like Emily shouldn't have to depend on their own courage to fight battles like this. Employers need to implement real protections. Co-workers need to be allies, not bystanders. People need to stop whispering rumors and start asking questions when they see something isn't right. Emily's letter became a symbol of that broader message, her words shining a harsh light on the systemic failure to protect her as a worker and as a person. Advocacy groups quickly took hold of her story, launching public awareness campaigns to address the uncomfortable truths behind what happened to her. "Workplace safety is everyone's job" became a tagline for multiple initiatives aimed at better supporting victims of harassment and tightening the reporting structures to prevent abuses of power. The cost of silence. For many, what stood out most in Emily's story was the silence that surrounded her suffering. The silence of co-workers who whispered but didn't intervene, the silence of managers who ignored workplace rumors, and the silence Emily herself felt she was forced to endure in fear of making waves. "There's this fear," Bennett remarked, looking at the steps of the courthouse where Michael Carter had been led away hours earlier, shackled and humiliated. "This stigma about being the one to come forward. People are afraid of being ostracized, of losing their job, of making enemies they can't afford to have. But staying silent doesn't make it go away. It just gives people like Michael the chance to do it again, to someone else." King ran his hand through his hair, his expression darkening. "And the thing is, the system doesn't make it easier for them. HR doesn't always take complaints seriously. A lot of these companies are more concerned about protecting their reputation than protecting their employees. By the time someone gets to the cops or a case like this, so much damage has already been done." Emily's death reignited discussions around these hard truths. Labor unions partnered with advocacy groups to push for expanded federal protections for employees facing harassment, including mandatory third-party review processes and stronger whistleblower protections. Senators and legislators cited Emily's case during hearings, calling for reform in the areas of workplace ethics training and reporting transparency. Empathy and action. What we can learn for Emily's community. Both those back in Vietnam and the Vietnamese American immigrants who had connected with her story, the loss hit especially hard. Her dreams of creating a better future for her family resonated as deeply as her struggles to find her place in an unfamiliar country. Her resilience in the face of abuse shone not as an invitation to pity her, but as an inspiration for action. "Stories like Emily's shouldn't need to happen before the world pays attention," Bennett said somberly. "We shouldn't need a tragedy to remind people that their co-workers, friends, or family might be suffering in silence. We have to do better for each other, without waiting until it's too late." The Tran family, devastated by their loss, worked to honor Emily's memory by launching a foundation in her name to provide aid to young immigrant women facing adversity. The foundation, operating both in Vietnam and the United States, aimed to provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and workshops on workplace rights and personal safety. At its core, it embodied the spirit of Emily's own hardworking and hopeful nature, ensuring her dreams to help others would continue even in her absence. Moving forward. King sighed, breaking his silence as the pair began walking toward their car. "You think people are going to actually remember, or is this just another case that fades out of people's minds in a year?" Bennett stopped mid-step, the question forcing her to pause for a moment. "Some will forget," she admitted. "But others won't. Those who knew her story, who saw what it cost, they'll carry this with them. For some, it'll make them speak up when they see something isn't right. For others, it'll be a wake-up call to step in, to listen better, to take action before it's too late. That's the kind of change we have to hope for. "And what about us?" King asked, voice quieter now. "What do we take from this?" Bennett looked at him, the weight of the case still lingering in her expression. "We keep fighting for people like Emily. We make sure her voice, her fight, wasn't in vain." As they drove away, the sun setting over the skyline, Bennett and King carried with them the haunting echoes of a case that would stay with them forever. Emily Tran's tragic death was not just a story of loss, it was a call to action that demanded vigilance, empathy, and courage in the face of injustice. And though they couldn't bring her back, they knew her fight for dignity and safety had left a legacy that would outshine the darkness of her final days.